Hi, I'm Jamieson Bunn, the Communications Program Manager for the City of Petaluma, and this is One Petaluma, your local government podcast. Welcome to our first episode. I'll be your host, bringing you news and updates from your city government to help demystify the work of your city staff, share stories and perspectives that you may not often get to hear, and help you to get more involved in our local democracy. If that's something you're interested in, then you're in the right place. I have been the city's communications manager for about a year and a half, and this is my first city government job. It has been a phenomenal education in how cities work, and Petaluma in particular is an ambitious and optimistic place. Petaluma's city staff in every department work hard to serve the community, but more than that, they care so deeply about making our city the best it can be. I feel very lucky to work here, and I'm excited for listeners to hear more from staff through this podcast about the work that they do and why they do it. My family moved to Petaluma from San Francisco about 5 years ago, and a few months later I found a new role as Director of Development at Committee on the Shelterless, or COTS, here in my new home. It was a job that helped me to feel more connected to my new community and to better understand one of the most serious issues that it faced. And every day we were asking questions about where government could help and where it couldn't. While working at COTS, I saw Petaluma's city government do something amazing with the launch of People's Village at the Mary Isaac Center back in 2021, a tiny house village designed to serve people experiencing long-term and chronic homelessness who were often reluctant to come into a traditional shelter. But People's Village also presented the city and COTS with some unique communications challenges. At the time, there were a lot of visible and growing encampments around Petaluma, in particular its steamer landing in the middle of the city. But almost nothing that COTS or city staff could say was getting these folks to leave their tents, their pets, their friends and communities, and their belongings behind to go into a shelter. If you work in the world of homeless services, you know it's not an uncommon problem. There are many valid reasons why someone might not want to sleep in a bunk room surrounded by 60 strangers, even without a pandemic going on. And when People's Village was launched, we were deep in the heart of COVID. Many of our unhoused neighbors felt that a shelter was the last place they wanted to be, especially when being unhoused often creates a lot of health challenges that make people uniquely vulnerable to viruses like COVID. But if you aren't already immersed in the human services industry, if you're just a regular Petaluma resident, for example, who goes to work every day and sees an encampment growing in the heart of your city, or if you're someone who has overcome a lot of challenges on your own, maybe, and doesn't appreciate the impact of our unhoused neighbors on the environment, our downtown businesses, or on the community's safety, then you might not understand why the city and COTS wanted to give these neighbors free tiny homes when they seemingly just didn't want to go into a shelter. When we were first trying to get people on board with the idea of People's Village, I found that compassion would only go so far. People had a hunger to understand the truth of what our unhoused neighbors were thinking and experiencing before giving them the benefit of the doubt that an individual tiny home would solve a problem that a dorm-style shelter couldn't. So that's how we approached it. All of our People's Village communications, both at COTS and through the city, started with the basic assumption that we needed to educate the community about why a person might reasonably resist shelter and services, and why we thought that providing them with a different option wasn't just kind, it was a well-thought-out, evidence-based, and intentional adaptation to the reality on the ground. For example, we started telling our donors that women might often be afraid to go into a shelter if they had experience with sexual violence. Veterans and people with experience in prisons often also would rather do anything than sleep in a shared bunk space like shelters usually have. But if we could offer someone a door that locked, that could be transformational and give someone a chance to feel safe enough to start getting out of survival mode and to help themselves get housed. I found out quickly that people could handle the truth about homelessness even when it was messy, complicated, or even sometimes scary. What they didn't want was just a pretty story designed to make them feel good. When people started to see what we at COTS and the city were seeing, they got on board. That's when I realized that if COTS could figure out a way to talk more honestly about homelessness, we'd have a better chance at actually solving it. Part of that was also talking about what government's role is, what the role of the service provider is, how that connects with the role of the community, and where all that ends and individual responsibility has to take over. Now that I'm a city employee, I and my team are trying to tell that same story from a different angle. But bottom line, our hope is to use this podcast to find a new way to get at the truth beneath the complicated day-to-day work of city government. In my first year on the job, we've primarily used email, social media, newspaper ads, or postcards to get you the information you need about what's going on in our community. But none of these mediums lend themselves to big questions like, how do we keep people safe from crime, from traffic accidents, or from climate change? Or how do our elected representatives on the city council work with city staff to achieve the community's goals? And most importantly, where do our residents come in? How does your participation and feedback actually help steer the ship? Making our democracy more transparent is something that motivates your city's whole communications team for sure, but also staff across every department. One of the first things I learned during my first year in government is that the staff here love Petaluma. Whether their families have recognizable last names and many generations of Petalumans behind them, or whether, like me, they were drawn here from elsewhere because of their jobs or the lifestyle, and stayed because they love it. They serve in city government because every day they get to make a difference in their neighbors' lives. That is one of the truths of government work that you don't often get to see. And my hope is that if we talk more honestly about government, how it works and why it works the way it does, we can build trust and bring our community deeper into these conversations and the democratic process. So that's what we'll be doing here on One Petaluma, asking big questions and small ones with the aim of demystifying our local government. We'll share some of our internal conversations and the struggles and joys of serving the community. You'll hear from staff at every level, from department directors to the frontline staff responsible for fixing our roads, performing traffic stops, or maintaining our facilities. For our first episode, I spoke to two of my colleagues here in Economic Development and Open Government, the department that oversees communications, about why they do the work they do and what they love about it and what some of the challenges are. Our first guest today is Ingrid Alverde, the Director of Economic Development and Open Government here at the city, and coincidentally, my boss. Ingrid oversees economic development, communications, and the city's IT department. Because if you're not wearing 5 different hats, are you really even a government employee? We'll also be joined by my coworker Jessica Medina, who focuses on communications around street improvements and major capital projects, like the upcoming skate park. Jessica and Ingrid pioneered our city communications program together long before I started in our department. Together, Ingrid, Jessica, I, and our colleagues in communications spend our workdays learning everything we can about how our government functions so that we can share it with you. We're excited to have a new medium so we can share even more. Ingrid, what is your name and your role here at the city?
My name is Ingrid Alverde, and my role is the Director of Economic Development and Open Government.
How long have you worked in city government?
I have been in city government for 30 years. I started as an intern while I was in college at UCSD and just found the work so interesting and rewarding that I never stopped.
What do you like best about working for the city of Petaluma?
I think my favorite part, or what I like best about working for the city of Petaluma, is the people. So the people that work with me in terms of staff, and also the community that we work for and with, and just getting to know so many cool, interesting people.
What do you find frustrating about working for local government?
I think the thing I find so most frustrating about working for local government is the fact that we just can't quite get it all done. It's always just eluding us a little bit in terms of we don't have quite enough resources, or there's just one more problem to be solved. And so I can never quite complete checking off all the items on the list.
What's one thing you would like to check off right now that you can't?
I'd like the community to really trust the Petaluma city government, and for our whole community to really feel like we've got their back and we're making good decisions and we're doing the best we can with the resources we have, and that they just know that.
So our communications department is part of the city's plan to help build that trust. Why has the city started prioritizing communications, and how did our relatively new department get off the ground?
Well, there's kind of two answers to that. So I'll start with the first one. The first one is that Peggy Flynn came as our new city manager in 2019. And she's an unusual breed of city manager that sort of came up through her municipal government ranks as a communications specialist. And so she knew instinctively how important communications is to running a local government and helping our community understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. The beginning of our program, where she came and said, we need to be doing communications. And I was the only one doing communications through the economic development lens. So she tapped me to kind of expand that. So that was the beginning. I think it really heated up when the shutdowns of COVID happened. And when all of a sudden we had to communicate at a very high level with a lot of intricacy and complications on a daily, sometimes hourly basis about what was going on. And I wasn't enough anymore. I think that effort, because we had to communicate at such a high level for so long, we just kind of naturally built our program through that effort, because then we started building muscles for daily, weekly, monthly communications, reaching out, getting information, boiling it down to what people needed to know, helping people connect the dots between what's happening in parks and streets and health and the other things that were going on with COVID. So I think COVID really, really pushed us.
Was that tricky to communicate information, especially around COVID, that wasn't always popular on the receiving end?
100%. In fact, tone was everything in that. We learned how important tone was. It wasn't about the information. I mean, it was about the information because people needed to know what the rules were or what they were supposed to do as the rules kept changing. So it definitely was about the information, but the tone was so important because as government, we were on a whole nother plane of regulating people's lives, helping give people information about their health and their safety in a way that we hadn't done before. So it was really tricky information, but we learned to give it a tone that felt friendly and not parenty. And that seemed to make a real difference. And I knew when we got it right, when we got an email back saying, thank you for this update. I feel like the city just gave me a warm hug. And we thought, okay, we're getting it right. We got all the information out there, but our community felt like we cared about them and we were supporting them, and we weren't hammering out all this information about what to do and what not to do and wagging our fingers. We're like, this is really hard and we're struggling too. And I just want you to know that we're there for you. And these are the 3 things we've done to support you. And here's the 3 things you need to know. And then here's the 2 things you actually have to do. So we tried to lead with empathy, follow with information, and just holding our community in our hearts, because we're all really family in the end.
What would you say the goal, or your goal, for Petaluma's communications department is?
My goal for the communications department is to have our pulse completely on every issue facing the community and have some way to connect and reinforce information with every single person in our community.
If you had an unlimited budget for communications, what else would we be doing?
I'd probably talk to each person individually. Like, I'd have a conversation. Maybe I'd go door to door. We would have more people on staff whose job it would be just to build and maintain relationships with our community. And they would do that in a variety of languages, from a variety of perspectives. We would just be reiterating everything we're doing in 1,000 different ways. So there would just be no way that someone wouldn't know what we're doing, who's doing it, why we're doing it, and that we're doing a pretty good job.
What do you wish people knew about local government that you're not sure that they do?
I really wish people knew that local government is made up of a lot of very hardworking, smart, dedicated people that are doing their very best every day.
All right, so Jessica, welcome to One Petaluma, our podcast. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jessica Medina. I serve as Communications Project Manager for the City of Petaluma for our capital improvements program and for other special projects. I started in communications with the city as a contractor. It was right around the start of the pandemic. Ingrid Alverde, who's our Director of Economic Development and Open Government, gave me a call and asked if I might be able to come on board full-time to help with crisis communications around the pandemic. I had a 9-month-old baby at the time and no childcare, but I was very excited at the opportunity. And so I jumped in and said, sure, I can do it. So in the early days of the pandemic, we were sending daily community update emails to a list of, I think, around 18,000 subscribers, Petaluma residents, people in the community. And basically what we would do is curate information from the county health department, the CDC, Gavin Newsom. Each day we would sort of comb all these resources to find pertinent information that we thought would be relevant to the community and helpful to the community. So we'd package that all together into a daily update. We'd do a small blurb with a link for each item. And we'd also include an introduction each day, which was sort of a way for us to reach out to the community, build a relationship, and also just let people know that we're here, we really care, we're all people too, and we're all in this together, and we're just trying to figure it out.
How did you figure out how to communicate with residents who might not be super open to hearing instructions from the government? Because it was a highly politicized time.
Yeah. I have said many times that I look forward to years from now looking back at the psychology of the pandemic and how it impacted everybody, because we did have, some people were completely on board and wanted to check all the boxes and follow all of the rules, checking the CDC website daily and things like that. And we also had people who were very hesitant or, mistrustful of the information that was being shared. And so I think my motto through that time, or sort of what I was operating under, was the belief that empathy and information were what could serve the community best. So leading with empathy that, hey, we're all scared, or we're all going through this and trying to figure out the best thing, and that we know it's overwhelming and it's not fun to be told what to do or that kind of thing. Really connecting to the human emotion of it all and having empathy for everyone's experience, even if it was different than mine. That, I think, was my guiding principle through that time. And then following that up with the information, like, here is what these sources are saying, and, do with it what you will.
And so now you are focusing on capital improvement projects and some of the other special initiatives that the city has going. What do you find valuable about being able to communicate our CIP program?
So my focus has now shifted from general communications to our capital improvements program. So our capital improvements program is made up of projects that focus on making a significant investment to create, maintain, or upgrade city facilities, city-owned facilities like streets, parks, utilities, and buildings. And one thing I really love about focusing on communications in this area is we're telling the story of these projects to the community and engaging in dialogue with the community around these projects that I see as really experiential for the community. So with the street work, for example, this could be the intersection you drive through every day on your way to work. And I think it's really important for people to be informed about the work that's being done, and also to understand how and when they can become involved and how their voice can be heard to help shape the work that is being done. This is your city. We want it to work for you. We want to hear what works for you, what you would like to see, concerns you have, things like that. So I find the CIP communications to be really an essential part of building the relationship with our community and really understanding what the community would like to see the city do. So one of the projects that I've really loved working on since my focus has shifted to CIP has been the Lucchese Skate Park project. From the beginning, we have had really great engagement from the skateboarding community and the people who love them. And, the first meeting, I think we had over 70 attendees. And it's been really cool to watch the relationship between that community and the city sort of blossom through that process. At the first community meeting, there were, rightfully so, a lot of questions asked of city staff and of the contractor who we're working with, Grindline, on the project. And I think at every subsequent meeting and the communications we've been having, I feel like the community has become more involved. I would hope that they feel very heard because their feedback has totally influenced the designs for that project. And so it just feels like a really collaborative project that we've created right along with the community. And I feel like that project has been a bit of a healing process with the community, like just this idea that you can, even if you're not involved or aware of city government, which I never was before I began working with the city, you can come and have your voice heard and really take part in this process. And it's a tangible thing that you can come and do and work alongside city staff and have your voice heard and valued and see the difference in the end result because of the input that you gave. So I think it's been a really cool process. And that's one of the things I love about working in CIP.
You mentioned earlier that you didn't know a ton about city government before you became a member of this staff. So what do you find most valuable about being a part of your local government and communicating on government subjects?
I really love working for the City of Petaluma. I grew up in this community, and so it's just very close to my heart. And I love being part of a team that is doing these projects that are really focused on making the community better and also hearing and understanding what the people of the community want and bringing that to reality through the work that we're doing. So it feels like a very special place to be for that reason, because I love Petaluma and I love the people here. All my loved ones are here, and I want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard so that the work we're doing really represents what people want.
We here at the City of Petaluma are doing this podcast with the goal of giving you, our neighbors, the information you need to get involved, participate in decision-making, and ultimately help shape the future of Petaluma so that it works for all of us. After all, that's when democracy is at its best, when it is truly a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be releasing episodes once a month, and our second episode will focus on a range of recent and upcoming traffic improvements, all with a single goal to create safe streets in Petaluma. We explore how do we work with the City Council to decide what street improvements to make across Petaluma? What are some specific changes being proposed to our roads? And do we hate cars, and therefore America? Have another question you'd like answered? Send them over to onepetaluma@cityofpetaluma.org. We may feature your questions in a future episode. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on social media or sign up for our bi-weekly emails. Just visit cityofpetaluma.org/subscribe. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day, Petaluma.